Good morning, happy Monday. I hope you had a nice weekend. I hope you slept well and you're feeling rested. And this is another week. It's the start of week 14 that many of us have been in lockdown, many of us not going to our normal place of work, and most of our children and young people not going to school or college. And as parents and carers, we've been at home doing whatever we can to get through, learning in ways together that perhaps have been new to us, using what school's been able to offer. Some people have had more involvement from schools, some less, depending on where you are. I'm in Scotland, and this is my last week of making these videos, because on Friday schools where I live break up for the summer and I still have teaching holidays, although I'm not 100% sure what the 6-week break will look like for me, because it may be that I will do some bits and pieces of work just to keep things ticking over. So there's a little bit of a sense around that. I'm not sure for me what it's going to look like, but I need a break. And I'm going to take a break of some description, stay here, but do things differently. So, remembering that we're doing this because of a global pandemic that is still out there. Perhaps some of us feeling a bit safer, a bit like the risk has gone or reduced. It hasn't gone. We are still at the status of a global pandemic. I was listening to the New Zealand Prime Minister this morning. She was speaking, Jacinda, about what it's like in New Zealand, where they're way ahead of us, but still aware of the global pandemic and what New Zealand needs to do to keep itself safe while things are different in the rest of the world. So I thought just a couple of things this morning. I just thought it'd be interesting to talk again. I've heard a lot of people over the last week say they're tireder than they've been, and why is that? Why are they so tired when all they've been doing is sitting at home for 14 weeks, they're saying. And I think the thing with that is we mustn't criticise ourselves if that is how we feel. Because although we may have been at home, there's been a lot to make us tired. So even the idea of, sitting and not being able to get out and do the normal things we do and exercise, that can be tiring. The being busy and then sort of not being so busy can be tiring. I think it's interesting if you think often if we go on holiday, we can spend the first couple of days actually feeling really exhausted before we then get into a phase where we start to enjoy the holiday. And so that idea of a change to routine, that can be tiring. And also we've, to some degree you may have settled into a new routine, which is great. But a lot of the last 14 weeks has been getting up each day and having that, I wonder what today's going to bring. I wonder what the pandemic's doing. I wonder if my child's going back to school. I wonder if work is going to ring me and get me to. And that can be really tiring, that constantly our brains and our minds having to make things up. Because normally we are quite routine based. Think about normally, and that's a funny word, but when you were in life before COVID, probably a fair bit of your life was on autopilot. So you're in a routine and you almost do things automatically. And that automatic pilot that we have is what gets us through most of the time. And because we haven't had as much autopilot, that's been quite tiring. So, if you think, maybe use the analogy of driving a car. When you've got gears to change all the time, there's a lot more movement, a lot more energy used there. Having to think, having to change gears, you're doing a lot more. If you drive an automatic car, it's a calmer, more relaxing, less energy using process. So we haven't had a lot of automatic pilot perhaps over the last few weeks, and that is tiring. So don't give yourself a hard time. And the last thing I just want to say is that for me this week, although I think there's probably only a couple of you watching, some of these videos have been really well watched because they got retweeted on Twitter. Others have got 1 or 2, maybe not any views. But I'm going to use this week just to kind of bring an end to these videos, because something, again, that is important to us as human beings is having times where we stop and we look back and recognise what's gone before, and we take some time to mark the end of something and the beginning of something new. And whether you call these things rituals or ceremonies or just transitions, they're important for us as humans to do, because they can help us to kind of finish something, take time before we rush into the next thing. Otherwise our lives can just become a bit sort of one thing after the other. So for me this week, I'm going to use a bit of time to think about the 13 weeks, to think about what might be coming next, and to just mark that time. You know, whether it's a ritual or just a time to think and reflect. And if you think, you know, as societies we do that when somebody's born, we maybe have a naming or a christening as a marking point. When somebody dies, we have a funeral or some form of ceremony. When children leave school, they have something to mark it, some sort of ceremony. And that's been difficult this year because we've had lots of school leavers who haven't had that. But some schools have just done the most beautiful, moving things on video or remotely to mark that. So marking change is important. So 5 more videos, and I invite you to take a bit of time to look at your lockdown experience. Maybe do it with your children. I think it could be a whole week's activity to look back and to think, what have we done? What have we achieved? Wow, what have we achieved? So I'll see you tomorrow. Have a good Monday. Stay safe, stay well. Remember to breathe. See you tomorrow.